Today, we're answering the question, why podcast? Welcome to the We Are Slam Show, a show where we share marketing trends, best practices, and ideas to help your business grow. My name is Tyler Kelly. I'm here with my co-host, Michael T. Johnson, and today we're answering the question, why podcast?
And I think there's three really, really big benefits to a podcast that you may not be thinking about.
So those three benefits are discoverability, authority, and engagement. And we're going to dig into each one in the show.
So the first major benefit is discoverability. It seems like right now everybody is talking about podcasting, or everybody has a podcast. Like your best friend, your neighbor, everybody's doing a podcast right now. I was on Facebook and I saw this article, I think it was an Onion article or something, that said thousands of millennials are without guests for their podcast this week. So that would make you think that, you know, podcasts are super saturated, everybody's doing a podcast, but it's not true. Everybody's talking about doing a podcast, but I don't think that many people are executing on it. But the benefit of discoverability, if you can actually execute consistently on a podcast, is that space is not actually that competitive. Like audio and video are much less competitive right now than written content. So you might actually have an easier time ranking and being discovered if you're doing video and audio content.
Yeah, and when you think about it, YouTube is the second largest search engine on the planet, right behind Google. In Google, you have your video results, and that's if you're going to do a video podcast, you're going to pop up there. But audio is becoming like a big player in search too, so much so that like a lot of what we're doing in this podcast arena is we're kind of preparing the way for audio answers and audio skills. And this is just kind of, you know, just now scratching the surface.
So if you're getting into audio, you're kind of future-proofing your brand, because think about how many homes have smart speakers, or how many people are doing searches with like Alexa or Google, or even with phones like Siri or, you know, whatever. I don't use an Android, so I don't know what the Google equivalent is, but
Google. Hey Google. Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody's using those things. And so I think the stat is 13% of households have some kind of smart speaker in their home that they can talk to or ask questions to. And by 2020, 50% of searches are supposed to be like voice activated searches. So people aren't even going to be typing things, or potentially not even using screens for their searches.
Yeah, and if you think about it on mobile, we don't have the stat there. But on mobile, the likelihood of the audio search happening is much greater, because who wants to type, you know, on your phone a search?
Especially when you're probably in your car.
Yes, or, you know, on the fly, you know, walking, or it's just better to say, hey Google, or hey Siri, or, you know, use your keyboard audio typing tool, whatever that may be. Yeah. And just, you know, do your search there. So search engines are becoming more advanced in terms of like figuring out what it is that you're saying and then directing you to the right result.
Yeah, and there's even this thing, which is way too in-depth for us to talk about today, but this idea of like Alexa skills, where if somebody, let's say I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I want my morning motivation for this morning. Mm-hmm. If you have like ranked for your short snippet of that, Alexa might read that back for that person. So if you can become like the foremost expert in something with short snippets of audio content, you'll own that voice search for that thing.
So why podcast? Number one is that it makes you discoverable in search. It puts you in places that not many people are currently in, and it's going to make your brand more discoverable. In search, the key, and in podcast, the key is consistency, right? Mm-hmm. So you're creating this content, and that content has a dual benefit. The second is that if it's good content, is engaging. And so let's switch from search to social. And with engaging content, now you're engaging your audience.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about this idea in episode 9. If you go back and listen to episode 9, we talk in depth about creating engaging content for your brand. Mm-hmm. But really, a podcast can be this big banner piece of content that helps you create all this micro content that you can put on every network and engage your customers, your followers, your audience in those places. And that's really the big opportunity of audio and video from a podcast. So that's definitely the second benefit, is engagement.
So when you engage your audience and you're providing consistent, fresh, relevant content that is relevant to your audience, to your prospects' needs, and questions that they're asking online, then at that point, you begin to be seen as an authority. And that's the number 3 benefit to podcasting, to answer the question, why podcast, is because it gives you that credibility, that authority.
As you become the authority on a subject, you're top of mind for people. So if they have a problem, they're going to be looking for you. You'll close more deals. You'll make more sales. You'll be more in demand as an authority on any subject. Now, there's another tactic that you can use if you have a podcast, especially if it's a podcast that has regular guests, and it's that you can build on the authority of your guests as well, build on their audiences and their authority. And there's a lot of people in the podcasting space that have done that. So they're not necessarily an expert on a subject, but if they bring on guests that are experts, they kind of like soak up that authority power that those people have, and they're positively associated with those people.
So Michael's hitting on this strategy that we like to use here at Slam called positive association. And that's where, as often as we can, we like to associate our brand and the brands that we work with positive associations. It's been shown that when a consumer has a positive association with a brand, that they're more likely to do business with them than if they have a negative connotation or association with that brand. And so it's super important to position yourself and your brand in places and in conversations that are positive, that will rub off on you in a positive way.
So those are the big 3 benefits. So we have discoverability, engagement, and authority. Now, Tyler kind of touched on this a little bit at one of the points, but we did promise to talk about the one big mistake that people make in podcasting. If you go back to that stereotype of like the thousands of millennials who need guests on their podcasts, a lot of people talk about having a podcast and they think, well, we're just going to sit around and talk about something for an hour and people are going to love to listen to it. Maybe, but probably not. If you're going to start a podcast, you really should be thinking about your audience. What's in it for your audience?
What's in it for them, right? So we always talk about WIIFM here at Slam. What's in it for me? And because that's what's on my mind as a consumer, as a prospect. The way that translates to the camera through the podcast audio is what's in it for them. So you as the host, as the producer of the content, needs to think, what's in it for my audience and how can I communicate that? And that's so important.
Yeah.
The big mistake that people make is that they just create content for the sake of creating a podcast, because podcasting is the big thing right now. So they just create a podcast. But what they neglect is, who is this podcast for? Like, what's my goal? What am I trying to accomplish? Am I trying to get more sales? Okay, if I'm trying to get more sales, then who's my target audience? Okay, that's the who.
Yeah.
And then what? What are the questions that they're asking, right? What are the questions that you should be answering in that podcast? You can't just sit around and have great conversations, because your audience, or your target audience, your target market, they're going to tune out. So be sure to make content that's relevant to the people that you're trying to attract to your business, and then you'll avoid that big mistake.
Yeah, and I think that goes to people's motivations for consuming any kind of content. So, I mean, people's motivations are usually, for one, entertainment. And let's be honest, most of us are not that clever or entertaining. There's very few of us who are that talented to entertain people. Mm-hmm. For me personally, I usually write that one off. And I would rather educate someone or help them solve a very specific problem. Mm-hmm. And like Tyler said, if you've defined the who your podcast is for, then that helps you guide your content to like what you're going to talk about, what problems you're going to solve. You should spend more time than you think you should spend on who that podcast is about, because that'll give you laser focus to valuable content.
100%. So if you have a question about podcasting, if this is something that you're thinking that you might want to get your brand or your company involved in, feel free to leave us a question, a comment right here in the comment section, and we will be standing by to answer your questions. And if this is your first time listening and you've enjoyed it, please subscribe, review the show for us, and rate and share it with your friends. Thank you for tuning in to the We Are Slam show. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for watching. If you like what you just watched, subscribe, then hit that bell. You'll be the first to be notified when new content goes live. After that, you can watch more videos from Slam Agency. We've picked something we think you'll love.